As I discussed with US analyst Kristin Tate, the media, other politicians, bureaucrats and world leaders are struggling to keep up.
That's the whole sort of plan, is to just flood the system with all of these bold EOs and just make it so that the liberal media can't even focus on one thing and start complaining and screaming about it, because before they're done, he's done 5 more things. I mean, every morning is Christmas morning here, Chris. I just love waking up and opening the newspaper and seeing what Donald Trump has done. I mean, so many of the things that have gotten done in just 3 weeks, if a president had just done one of these things, it would be huge. I mean, banning men from women's sports, that's been a huge issue in this country. Our military recruitment is now at a 15-year high because he's already starting to make the military strong again. On the border, I mean, down where I used to live, there's a sector called the Del Rio sector where under Biden, we were seeing about 4,000 migrants come through just that sector per day. Now that's down to about 60 per day. I mean, it's just winning, winning, winning. So now we need to actually put a lot of these EOs into law so that many of these mandates will last beyond the Trump administration. But man, I just love what I'm seeing so far.
Well, I'll tell you what, one person who's had to hurry up to keep up with Donald Trump is our Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese. He hadn't spoken to Donald Trump since his inauguration. We knew tariffs could be an issue, and when Donald Trump announced tariffs on all imports into the US of steel and aluminium, that was something Australia had carved out previously. We need it carved out again, and our Prime Minister was on the phone to the President this morning, our time. Here's what he said afterwards.
I presented Australia's case for an exemption, and we agreed on wording to say publicly, which is that the US President agreed that an exemption was under consideration.
Well, he's not the most dynamic character as our Prime Minister, but it sounded like a reasonably good outcome. It suddenly got a lot better only really an hour or so later when Donald Trump spoke to reporters from the Oval Office.
I just spoke to him, very fine man, and he has a surplus. I mean, we have a surplus with Australia, one of the few. And the reason is they buy a lot of airplanes. They are rather far away, and they need lots of airplanes. And we actually have a surplus. It's one of the only countries which we do. And I told him that that's something that we will give great consideration to.
He's a fine man, says Donald Trump. That's a hell of a lot nicer than anything our Prime Minister ever said about Donald Trump in the past. But that sounds like a pretty good outcome on the cards for our country.
Yes, I mean, the relationship is clearly in good shape. And remember, Australia had an exemption from such tariffs during Trump's first term. But, you know, the idea with these tariffs very generally is just to protect U.S. manufacturers from unfair competition. It's also a national security threat, right? Like, our national security was threatened by this global oversupply of steel, and Trump is trying to take actions to protect America's national security. But it sounds like an exemption is going to happen, and you know, the United States does have a trade surplus with Australia.
Yeah, that is good news and a sensible move out of the White House yet again. Now, on the program last night, I was lamenting the macabre displays we're seeing in the Middle East thanks to Hamas, their treatment of hostages, their drawing out of the ceasefire process. And I noted then that surely this ceasefire can't last through this terrible procession. So it wasn't surprising, although it was encouraging, to see Donald Trump say this today.
As far as I'm concerned, if all of the hostages aren't returned by Saturday at 12 o'clock, I think it's an appropriate time. I would say cancel it and all bets are off, and let hell break out. All of them, not in drips and drabs, not 2 and 1 and 3 and 4 and 2. All hell is going to break out. And I don't think they're going to do it. I think a lot of them are dead.
Yeah, we can all agree with the sentiment, Kristin, but it's very, very difficult, of course, because Hamas are a death cult. They still have hostages. There are civilians involved. We want them to hand over everybody immediately. Let's hope that's what they do.
Yes, this was another example of strong leadership by President Trump. I mean, basically one of three things is going to happen here, and all three case scenarios are better than what was the case under Biden. Scenario one is that the threat works and the hostages are released. Obviously, that's what we want. Scenario two is they're released faster than they would have been, maybe not by this deadline, but they're released faster. Option three is the hostages are not released. And then at least in that case scenario, it emboldens Israel to take stronger action. And clearly Trump is behind Israel, and it gives him even more reason to do so in the public eye. So this was the right thing to do by President Trump.
Yeah, thanks for joining us, Kristin. We'll watch that one in coming days, and we'll catch up with you next week to see how much they can cram into that White House minute when they post that on social media next week.
Sounds great. Thank you, Chris.